Hi, I'm Jessica with Ellie and Mac, and today we're going to be learning how to make the Claudia Cubic Bag. This is such a unique bag because it has a zipper that opens on the diagonal, which allows the bag, when you open it, to open all the way up, and you can see anything that's inside and grab anything out that you need without having to dig around in the bag. It's just flat on the bottom. There are a couple pockets that you can add to the side, and it has these side flaps which you can choose to sew into the side of the bag, and I'll show you that way if you'd like, or you can not sew them and just have them kind of flap closed when you open and close the bag, and then just prop them open. It's totally up to you. Now this bag does need interfacing, so we'll go over that a little bit too. And what's nice is that, you can have all that stuff open and then close it up. So this will be great for organization. It's great for travel. It's even fabulous in your sewing space. You can put, clips or pins or a whole bunch of different things in there with you or on the go, and then just open it up and have everything be visible. So let's get started. The pattern piece is kind of fun. It looks like a spaceship, right? Anyway, so we're going to talk about the interfacing. So I've got the main fabric here underneath, and then the lining fabric on top. And then I have to cut it one more time in either fusible foam or fusible fleece. And you do need that heavier interfacing. I did make this bag the larger size of it once, and I used a light to medium weight interfacing, and the bag structure just collapsed. So it was fine if you had stuff in it, but you couldn't set it out and have it like everything be showing, because it kind of just the sides and everything just kind of like slouched down. So if you want that structured bag, make sure that you do cut a stiff interfacing, and I'll show you which one I will use. So this one is my fusible fleece. A lot of little parts here, but you can kind of see how it's pretty stiff, and it's going to cause the bag to be able to like sit upright how we want it. If you use something a lot lighter, you're not going to get that same effect. You can still make the bag with lighter interfacing. You just may not get, the kind of bag that you want. So just keep that in mind. If you decide to make this elastic side pocket, you might wonder what these like extra lines are on here, and it'll look the same on the print file. It'll just be like a cutting line that's solid here and then another line. Okay, so that other line is a folding line that we're going to use, and so just you can mark it. I'm not going to go all the way along. I'm just going to do like a little basically dash every so often, just so I know where it is on all 4 of the sides. And then there is one more dashed line down the middle, which is where we're going to fold it. If you want to mark that, you can. I'm just going to mark it here on the very outer edge. And that way when we get to that part, you'll already have this marked. If you don't, you can come back and mark it. It's not a big deal. And I think these are 3/8 inch. It's just the seam allowance. So if you've already marked it and maybe you used your projector, but you didn't mark this part, you can just go in the same amount. Yeah, so if you've already cut this, but you're like, what are those lines? Or you didn't notice them, just come in 3/8 inch on all these sides. Okay, we're gonna start with the elastic side pocket. And if you haven't already made markings, we can do that as we go along. But the main one you need to know first is where that fold line was. This is a rectangular piece, so it is the longer side here that we're gonna fold. And on mine, it's very difficult to tell the front from the back, but we're going to say this part that I've marked is the right side, and this is the wrong side. So we're going to fold this at that fold line, wrong sides together, just like this. And we can pin or clip those edges into place just to make sure that they are completely even and in half. And then we're going to go press right here on that fold and top stitch it. So take this over to your iron and get this really nicely pressed right here on this fold line. Okay, now that mine is nicely pressed, I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch. about 3/8 of an inch from the fold line here, and this will create a casing for later for our elastic. And make sure you use a stitch length of about 3 to 3.5. And you'll see in this step that I top stitched too close to that folded edge. It is supposed to be at that 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter, so make sure that you do it the correct way. You'll see in the next little bit that it still looks too close, but I do fix it before we get to the elastic part. Okay, from here on out, we'll kind of be pretending that these two edges are just one piece of fabric. And along these lines, which should be 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter from the raw edge of the fabric, we're going to fold those to the wrong side, whichever you choose is to be the wrong side, because technically both of these can be the wrong side, right? So maybe you look at your stitches and you're like, I like them better on this side. And that can be your right side. And then we're going to fold the fabric along those lines like that, and we're going to go press them. So fold it to the wrong side, or fake wrong side, all along those marked edges, just like this, and press really nicely. And then we'll come back. Okay, I have all of mine pressed to that fake wrong side. And then we'll go to the right side, and it should look like this. And what you're going to do is on these corners with this still folded in, we're going to fold them right sides together, just like this. And you can line up those folded edges and pin or clip that. And we'll do the same thing over here, right sides together, matching up those folded edges, and put a pin or clip. And the instructions, you'll see it looks like this, you know, has that little corner right there. And so we want that the same on both sides. And we're going to take that over to the sewing machine, and we're just going to sew using this corner, or this edge right here as our seam allowance point, with that 3/8 inch seam allowance right here. And make sure you go all the way from the top through that bottom area there. Okay, once you have those both sewn, we are going to trim these corners. I'm going to use pinking shears, but if you want to use regular shears, that's okay too. This just prevents it from fraying. So we're going to do that on both sides. And then you will flip that right side out. And what you'll have is just a little boxed corner, which gives this pocket some dimension. So that is what we're going to put on the interior of the bag in here in just a moment. Okay, you won't have done the same thing because this will be correct in the video, but I stitched too high to the top here and it was supposed to be 3/8 inch. So I've redone that. And now you should have your boxed corners and your gap right here for the casing, which should be 3/8 inch down from that folded top. Next, we're going to grab a 1/4 inch elastic, and I'm just using braided elastic. It doesn't really matter too much in here. Like, there isn't enough room for this to really flip around or anything, so use what you have. So we are going to cut this 3 inches shorter than the top here. But when you get elastic, always make sure that you pre-stretch it. You kind of want to exercise, they call it, the elastic a little bit, to make sure that it doesn't also stretch later, and it will if you don't do this first. So we have from here to here on our top, that's the length, and then just subtract 3 inches from that, and that is where you'll cut there. And you don't have to use pinking shears, they're just here by me. And then we're going to braid that, or I'm sorry, we're going to put that through the casing here. Okay, so I have a little safety pin on the end of my elastic, and you need to make sure that it's small enough that it'll fit through this little casing. And then we're going to stick it through one of the sides here and just try to grab it around that, kind of work it in. Make sure that it doesn't come all the way through. You can hold on to this side. Okay. And then when we've got it all the way through, we're going to grab some pins, or you can safety pin these sides, but pins will work better as far as getting them out of the way as you sew this. So you want to get them kind of just to the edge there before where we folded it before. I need to pull that raw edge out just a little bit. And then we will pin that so that it doesn't come undone on both sides. And then we'll just baste across that elastic right here at each end, right there and right there, to make sure that it doesn't come undone. And if you feel like this is like not enough elastic or too much, you can adjust how long the elastic is, but I think that looks pretty good. It will keep our pocket like in like this. So let's go baste it up. And then you can press these sides in again if you need to. Mine are kind of already still pressed in, but if you need to go back to the iron and make sure that those are all pressed to the wrong side at that 3/8 inch at the top near the elastic, you can do that. And then we're going to grab our interior body piece. And on mine, I have interfaced just the 2 areas where the pockets go, but you can choose to interface the whole thing. That's up to you. And on this side, I'm going to flip it this way. This will be for our slip pocket, and this is where the elastic pocket will go. And the way that this bag works is that you're going to fold it up like this, and this side right here will be the top. So we want the pockets to go up this way. So I'm going to go ahead and lay that on there. Now, if you have marked it where the pocket goes, that's perfect. If you haven't, or you just want to be sure about the center of your lining right there, you can fold it in half and put a little pin or clip or marking there, and then you'll know that that is the center. And we can do the same thing with this. And that way we can line them up. You want to make sure that wherever you put the pocket, that it doesn't go below this imaginary line right here. It needs to be above that. So we can line it up with the center here and make sure it's not too high and it doesn't go below this line. And then we're just going to go ahead and pin it in place. So make sure that those folds that we made and pressed are still folded to the wrong side. And depending on how long your elastic is, like if your elastic is a little bit longer so it doesn't scrunch up quite so much, you can actually make this straight. But if your elastic is a little bit tighter like mine, then it may do a little bit of a curve. And that's okay as long as we get it centered and straight on both sides like that. And then we're just going to take out the sides here, and we're going to make them a little bit straight, but still with that fold. And then we're going to pin it all in place along here. Okay, and then we'll take this over to the sewing machine and we will backstitch really well on both of these sides. We'll come down, around, and back up, and then that will be all secured and we'll have our little pocket. And voila, we have our little pocket on. As I was sewing, I noticed there was like a couple of puckers in the lining fabric here that I had to kind of pull out. So make sure that that stays completely straight underneath. And then you'll have your lovely little elastic pocket. If you'd like to add a little touch, or if you're making the bigger bag and you want to make sure this stays very secure, you can add a little rivet right up in this corner right here, and one in this corner right here, just to give that a little bit more strength. Or if you're concerned, you could also do a little triangle right here. That's not in the instructions. I just backstitched really well, but if you're worried about it, you could just do a little extra stitching right here in the corners. Okay, next we're going to do our slip pocket. So if you have the fold line marked, that's where we're going to fold it. If you don't, it's pretty simple. It's rectangular, and we're going to fold it along that longer side here. So again, my fabric is a little difficult to tell which is right and which is wrong side, but we are folding this right sides together, the fashion fabric right sides together. So fold that as such. And we're going to line up all those raw edges, and we'll start pinning and clipping, but we're going to leave a gap right here in the center, about 2 to 3 inches, not too big. And I'm going to just mark that by putting a couple extra clips. If you like pins, you can do the same thing, or put a little X with your pins to remind yourself not to sew in that area. But we are going to sew all the way around the rest of this. So we'll backstitch, so up to here, and backstitch, backstitch, and backstitch all the way around using the seam allowance 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter. Okay, once you have that all stitched, we are going to just trim up the corners and sides just a little bit. So you can trim the seam allowance about halfway down, and then over at the corners here, we're going to do a little bit too. We're not going to trim between the gap though, because we need that to stay a little bigger so that we can easily fold in that part. So you can go right up to where you stitched and stop. And then here at the corners, if you have regular shears, that's okay too. But we're just going to go ahead and trim the exact same way. We'll do a little bit more trimming right here near these corners just to remove that bulk. And then the same thing on the other side. And then we'll turn it right side out through the gap. And on these corners, you can kind of stick your finger on there and push it out just a little bit, but then you might need a blunt object to get them looking really nice on all 4. So I'm going to grab, I have a little chopstick that I keep in my room. So we can grab your blunt object, and we can press all these corners out. Now don't press too hard or else your corner will get wonky. We're just trying to make them be, not rounded, but instead straight. So you can do like this, and then you can also grab like a little pin or an awl or something if you need to pull that corner out. And then we will go press this really nicely. And then at the gap, we're going to fold those raw edges in 3/8 of an inch so that they create a straight line all the way across when pressed. So I'm going to go press mine, and you go press yours too. Okay, once you have it pressed really nicely, we are going to go take this to the sewing machine. We're going to leave this gap side here, and along the side without the gap, the long edge, we're going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch from the top edge there. Okay, grab that interior body again, and we're going to flip it to the other side that we haven't put a pocket on. And we're going to place this one on the markings, or centered here. He didn't mark it, centered here, and you want to just make sure it's above this line and not into the seam allowance here. So the top stitch edge will be here toward that outer side, And then we are going to pin it on, centered right there. And once we have it all pinned, we will just go ahead and top stitch this, or I should say edge stitch it, about 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the pocket all the way around the sides and bottom, but not the top. And that way we can get into it. And then you can also do 1 stitch right across the center here. And if you're not sure where that center point is, you can fold the pocket. You can do this before you pin it on, or you can do it now. It doesn't really matter. And then find that center. I'm going to kind of finger press it there. And then you'll know where to put that center marking. Make sure it's straight. And we're going to, on all of these top points, you want to back stitch really well to make sure that doesn't come undone with use. Okay, so around and up and the center point. Okay, once you have that all sewn up, you can choose to add a rivet at these 3 points. One here in the corner, one in the center on the top, and one in the other corner just to keep everything secure. That's totally up to you, and you can use whatever size rivets you think look good in that area. And just remember that you do need interfacing on the back. And if you're doing rivets, you really should add an extra piece of thick interfacing right where the rivets are, even if you already have interfaced, add another piece of interfacing in these spots. Okay, moving on to the handle. I have the fabric handle cut out. If you have the leather handle cut out, it's super simple. You don't need to do any of this stuff. And I'll show you that in just a moment. But if not, and you're doing the fabric handle like me, then you need to make sure that you have a thick piece of interfacing and you put it right down the center of this, leaving the seam allowance gap here. And then we're going to take each of these long edges to the wrong side and press well. Just like that. And then on the short edges, we're going to fold those in to the wrong side and press. Same with the other side. And then with these short edges folded in still, we're going to fold it back up how we had it before. And it should just kind of fold into place because it's already been folded once. But on these corners, you'll have to give it a little bit more heat just to make sure they cooperate. And the same on the other side. Just make sure that short edge stays tucked in there. Okay, and then once you got everything tucked in there, we're going to fold it one more time in half to the wrong side and press again. And all of your raw edges should now be inside and not showing. And just make sure that on that folded edge that it's really nicely aligned. I'll turn it this way so I can see it better. If you have a clapper, you can put that over top and just let that set for a bit and make sure it's all nicely pressed. And then we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch 3 lines. So you can start with this open edge here, stitch a line about 1/8 of an inch from the edge all the way down, and then the same on this side, 1/8 of an inch all the way down, and then 1 in the center all the way down. And make sure you back stitch at both ends. This is just going to be placed right on the bag like that. So we're not going to fold it in or anything. So you need to make sure that those don't come undone. Okay, so that was the fabric one. In just a moment, I'm going to flip to another video where I show you how to do it with the vinyl or faux leather, or you can use like the vinyl that is kind of pre-made on the sides. But either way, you're going to be cutting 2 pieces of fabric and sewing two stitch lines. So in just 1 second. Okay, so for vinyl, we're grabbing those 2 pieces that you've already cut, placing them wrong sides together, and then you're just going to edge stitch down both of the long sides about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And that's it. And then you'll put it on the bag. Then we're going to grab our exterior body piece, and mine is marked here on this side. If you don't have yours marked, you can go back and do that. But it's basically the center of this piece here. And you're going to just go ahead and line your handle, whichever side you think is the prettiest. I like this side, but I need to cut that little thread right there. It's bothering me. Isn't this fabric so fun? This is like a vintage fabric that I got, and I actually made a pair of pants with it too. And I call them my flower power pants. So perhaps this will be my flower power bag. Anyway, so grab whichever side you like your favorite, and see how the edge is there and there. I'm going to line that up, and I'm going to line this up, and you should have a gap on the bottom. It's not going to be sitting flat like this. You should have a gap that comes up like this, and we're just going to stitch it on both sides, or we're going to use rivets. So this is up to you. You can either do a box stitch on each side. So you're going to do a square and then an X in the middle on both sides, or you can put 2 rivets in, 1, 2 on each of these sides. If you're doing this, you may need to pick the right rivets. Like some of the rivet heads are going to be too wide to fit 2 across on here. So just look and see what you have, place them on there before you make any holes, and then you can decide if you want to stitch it or put the rivets. To do this box stitch, we are going to align one of the sides, and you can pin these into place, but I find that like I pin it and then like I have to unpin it anyway, so I don't know, it doesn't really do much favor for me. But if you feel like you want to pin it, you can. I'm just going to align it with the chalk marking that I made, and I'm going to start right there on that edge, and you can choose a stitch length between 2 to 3. And then start about 1/8 of an inch from this edge here. We're going to go down. We're going to back stitch. And then I'm going to do one more tiny stitch at just like a stitch length of 1, just to go a little further. And then we're going to turn. And we'll go this way. And I'm actually going to follow pretty close to that side stitching line. You can go out to the edge further, or you can choose right here on the stitching line. It doesn't really matter. And I'm going to try to make this a square. So however long it is on the end is how far we're going to come out. So we'll go, I went 5, I'm going to go 6 stitches that way, and then turn it, and we'll come back. That was 6, so I did the right amount. And then we're going to go all the way around that square first to our starting point, and then we'll go diagonally to the other corner. And then we'll go back across the line that we already stitched here, and then to the opposite corner. And that way we'll have a very secure corner here. This handle will not come off. And back stitch. And that's all there is to it. Now you have your square with your X, and we'll just do the same thing on the other side, and we'll make sure that you align it where the chalk marking is so that you have like that big gap, and then you can easily grab the handle underneath the gap. And if you choose to add the rivets instead of doing the box, they should look just like this. Okay, next we're going to work with our zipper. So you should have the zipper length from the pattern. I'm making the size small, so mine's 24 inches, but yours will be different if you're making a larger bag. This is Zipper by the Yard, and I don't have a pull on it currently. And on these ends, I've already melted them with a lighter to make sure they don't fray. On each of these ends, we are going to make a marking 1 inch from the end. I believe that's 2.5 centimeters right here, and on both sides of the tape, and on the other side too. Just like that. So you have both of them marked. Now you'll grab your exterior piece. Okay, and it doesn't matter which side of this piece we start on. I'm gonna choose to do the handle part second just because it'll add a little bulk over there. Remember, we have that marking. We're going to start by placing this right sides together with the exterior front. So see, this is the top of the zipper. We're gonna put that down on the right side of this, and right where that corner is, we're gonna align that with the marking that we made. And you can pin or clip. I like to pin. I mean, I'm sorry, I like to clip these. Partly because it's easier and partly because it kind of eats up your zipper if you use too many pins on it. Continue to pin or clip along the entire side of that bag. And I'm not like stretching, but I am making sure that this stays taut. When you come around this corner, you can kind of just hold it in place there. Okay, and when you come to the end, you should see that this side matches up with that little marking on the zipper. If it doesn't, then you might need to reassess like how you pinned, clipped, or cut this. But you can also, if you think you've clipped it or pinned it really well, make another marking to where you know exactly where the end of that is. Okay, and then you can go ahead and separate the zipper into 2 halves, so we can just pull that off. I know this part's kind of scary, but we're gonna do it anyway. And we're gonna flip this around. I'm gonna put one more clippy right there. Okay, I'm gonna flip this around to the other side, and we're gonna do the same thing. So again, we're gonna go right sides together, and we're gonna start with that marking right at the tip of that side. And then we'll continue to clip or pin all along here. Okay, now that you have that all pinned or clipped into place, we're just gonna sew around, but we're gonna start at the same side. So I'm gonna mark this with purple, just so I know that this is the side that I'm gonna start on both of these. So you can grab your zipper foot and sew around here and sew around there. If you wanna do just slightly less than 3/8 inch seam allowance, you can. And then we're gonna sew again the lining on. So the reason that we're starting on the same side on both is so that the zipper doesn't become wavy, because sometimes when you go one way on one side and the other way on the other side, you know, the tension of sewing one direction will cause the waviness. So we don't want that. So that's the reason why we're starting at the same side on both. If you find that too difficult, you don't have to do it this way. You probably will get better results if you do. Okay, so when you start this, just make sure, because that's a real skinny little end there, that we start all the way at the end with the correct seam allowance. You can kind of go a little bit further on the zipper if you need to. That's okay. And then we're going to go just a tiny bit less than 3/8, just so that the stitches don't appear on the other side. So we're going to do this, we're going to do the lining, and then we're going to flip it the other way, and we don't want the stitches to be like doubled up or anything. So just a tiny bit less. Okay, on this other side, in order to start from the same area, you can either feed it through the other way, but now you kind of lose your seam allowance, right? Or you can just flip it over and put the zipper on the underneath, and that works pretty well too. You just need to make sure that the whole way, you're aligning those two edges of the zipper and the raw edge of your fabric, and then you'll get the same results. So we're going to go ahead and do that again with that just slightly less than 3/8 or 1 centimeter seam allowance. Okay, once you have all that sewn on, and you could baste it. I actually sewed it with a real stitch, so that's up to you. But we are going to put the lining on. So if you want to put it right sides together, if you want to do it this way or this way, it doesn't really matter. So we can just put it on. If you want to look and see how the other bag works, so this is the side with the handle, and when you open it, you have whichever side. So the one with the handle right now is the slip pocket, and the other side is this one. So when you close it up, it's going to do like that. So I don't know, maybe you want to put the one with the elastic on this side because it might hold it better, but I don't think anything really falls out, because if you can see how this kind of works, like this is your slip pocket and it ends up just being right here. See, so it doesn't go all the way upside down. So either way is really fine. So we're going to lay that right sides together with the exterior body, and we're going to make sure that that zipper is still pressed down the same way it was before. If we have it up like this, we're going to catch the zipper, so we want it down. And then we're going to start on the same side again. So look at your zipper and find the marking that you made. Remember, mine was purple, so I'm going to start on that side. And you want to make sure that when you line this up, that those little triangular corner points match up with the lining and the main here. You might see there's like a little bit of pocket bulk and handle bulk there, so you might have to kind of pull it into place. So you can even like kind of fold this up. Fold it up and make it stay so that you can pull this out and not have a bunch of tension on it. So whatever you need to do to move that around and make it easier on yourself. Okay, and once you have that all pinned or clipped into place, we're going to take this back to the sewing machine and do the same thing as we did with the lining. You'll find whatever side you started on, and you'll sew from here all the way to here, this time with the full 3/8 inch seam allowance and a zipper foot. And then on this side, the same point. So we start here and we start here, and sew that way. Okay, once you have that sewn all the way around, we're just going to flip it right side out through one of these big gaps. Okay, and then you want to take this over to your iron if your fabric is ironable. And if you're using something like vinyl that can't be ironed from this side, but you have cotton on this side, you can like reduce your heat on your iron and still press it from the lining. But be really careful with the zipper too, because for example, my zipper is nylon coil and it will melt if I put the iron on it. So you need to be really careful to just only be pressing like on the fabric that is okay to press. If you can't do that, you can start by finger pressing it, and then you can use a roller to get that really nicely pressed down on both sides, both the exterior and lining. We want to push that away from the zipper, and because we're going to top stitch through it. So I'm going to go iron mine up really well, and you do that too, or use your roller, whatever you need to use to get that really nicely pushed away from the zipper on both sides. Okay, I've pressed mine from both sides. So now on both of the sides, we're going to come from the top of the fabric. Make sure you're doing this on the main side so you can see those stitches really nicely and have them look the best from this outside. And you may need to use a zipper foot, but we're going to stitch about an eighth or just a tiny bit less than an eighth of an inch away from the zipper on the seam here, all the way around here, and then the same on this other side. Another thing you need to think about as you're going around is just make sure that that lining fabric doesn't pop up. So as you're going, you can kind of push both of the sides of the fabric away from the zipper. And then I'm going to use a stitch length of 3 to 3.5. And whether you use 3 or 3.5, it's dependent on your machine of how well the feed dogs pull the fabric through. Can it handle thick things? And how thick your fabric is. If your fabric is thicker, you'll want to go up on the stitch length because it will have a harder time pulling that thick fabric through. So you'll get a longer stitch length, which you may need. Okay, now we're going to move on to the side panels. So I have one main panel and one lining panel, and we're going to put these right sides together. So this is the right side of the pink one. I know it's hard to tell on that one. And we're going to match up all those raw edges, and then we'll pin or clip it into place. So you want to do 2 short sides and 1 long side. It doesn't really matter which long side, unless your fabric has a directional to it. If it has a direction to it, then you can kind of think about if you think it will look best to put that on the bottom, the gap on the bottom, so that you can't see that part as well. But on mine, I don't think it really matters which way I put it. So we can go ahead and just pin or clip this into place. And so we're going to sew a short side, a long side, and a short side, and then leave this one unsewn. I'm going to do the same thing with the other one. We're going to put them right sides together, and you can pin or clip them into place on those 2 short and 1 long edges. And then sew the 2 short and 1 long side. And if you've got that directional fabric, you can leave the gap on the bottom side. Okay, next we're going to trim down the seam allowances all the way around, and then on the corners we're going to cut them this way, close to but not through the seams. And you can choose to use pinking shears or regular shears for this, whatever you feel like. I have this little mat that's kind of fun. It is actually, I think, for gardening, but the sides curl up and then it rolls up. But what I've been using it for is all the little scraps that when you trim, they just go all over the place. So I'm going to put that over this, and then I can just put it all into the garbage can. So we're going to trim down this side about half of the seam allowance, a corner, okay, next we're going to turn these right side out. And on these corners, you can kind of stick your finger in there and get it nicely turned. And then we'll use a blunt object to make the corners look a bit nicer. So I have just a chopstick, and you can stick those into each of the corners just to give them that nice 90-degree turn. Just don't press too hard, or else that corner kind of pops out like too far, and then it doesn't look very good. So that looks pretty nice. And then take these over to your iron, and we want to get those pressed back into shape very nicely from both sides so that like these top raw edges line up well, and it looks really nice. Okay, once you have those both nicely pressed, we're going to take this back to the sewing machine, and we're going to stitch, we're going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch away from the edge on all those finished seams. And then we're also going to baste at 1/8 of an inch across these raw edges just to keep them closed. So you can use a stitch length of 3 to 3.5 across this area, and then you can up it to 4 or 5 if you want across the bottom basted area on both of them. Okay, after you have the side panels sewn up, we are going to flip to the lining side of the bag, and we're going to get that basted edge with the raw edges and put that right sides together with the lining. So pink and pink on mine, and make sure these are kind of centered up here. I'm going to put a pin or clip right here. I have a center line marking from the pattern right there, so I'm going to put that there. If you don't, you can fold them together and find that center. And then the same with these. If you want to be really accurate about it, we can go fold it and get that middle, and then line up those two on mine clips to find that center, and then clip all along. Make sure you get both the main and lining of the bag clipped into this, because we're going to sew through all of those layers. And then the same on this side. And then you can kind of eyeball it and make sure, does that look centered? Like, does it look the same distance from here to here and here to here? And are these the same? You know, I think it's okay on mine, but just kind of take a look at yours and make sure everything's centered up. And then we're going to go over to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew right here along this edge and right here along this edge. And you can sew with just slightly less than 3/8 inch seam allowance, just so that it doesn't show up later. When you sew this, just make sure you go all the way to the end of the side panel. Don't start at this side of the bag. Go all the way to the end of the side panels, all the way down. Okay, once you have those sewn on, it should look like this. And then we're going to add the zipper. So 1 or 2 pulls, and you can decide what you want to do there. And I have this little zipper jig that I use, so if you've got that, great. But we just want to put this on like this. And then, you know, it can be kind of confusing which way to go, but just kind of play with it, and I'm sure you'll figure it out. Make sure they're pretty even. I'm going to zip it all the way through and off the other side. And if you're happy with how even that is, then we'll do it one more time. just go back to the same starting point where you put the zipper on and undo it. And the reason we do this is just so that the zipper is on the middle and the rest of the zipper is closed. And that way we can baste the zipper ends, you know, so that they don't come apart here in just a moment. Just like that. And then we're going to take this over to the sewing machine and stuff those sides in so that they're not causing issues. We're going to take this over to the sewing machine, and on the ends here, we're going to baste this closed, but we're going to baste it right here about where that triangle stops. Back and forth here and back and forth on this side. If you're using a metal zipper, then you may need to hand stitch this or just hand crank the machine through so you're not breaking needles. And then I'll show you the next step. Okay, once you have those basted, we're going to trim the zipper ends. So you can use pinking shears or regular shears, whatever works best for you. I'm using pinking shears just because the zipper will fray a bit less. You can also choose to apply a bit of heat to the end of the zipper right here. Just be really careful. Like if you're using cotton, you might have that end go up in flames. So if you're using, you know, more synthetic fabrics, then it will be fine, but just be careful. So choose the way you want to stop the fraying. Okay, now we are going to open up that zipper all the way. And if you're using one pull, you can pull it to here. If you're using two pulls, you can also do that. And the zipper ends would, you know, be facing each other. Then you'll pull them to the side like this so that the zipper can open up all the way. Hopefully you have those zipper ends basted very nicely so that it doesn't pull off the end on both sides. Okay, this part's a little tricky, so pay attention here. So after we have those side panels and we've got the zipper and we did this part, we need to flip it to the exterior side. Flip it all out this way so that you have your outer fashion fabric with your handle here like this. And those side panels will be over here on the other side. And you should be able to see this seam right here. If you don't, and it's like this, then you've sewn the side panels on wrong. You got to seam rip them and come back. So make sure it looks like this. And you have your exterior side up. And then we are going to pin or clip this down into place. And all those raw edges should be showing there. These boxed corners, you just want to make sure you have that flipped out all the way and that the lining and main on these, so they're not basted together, are matching up right here at the edge. Now this is really simple to do on the side without a zipper, but on the other side that has a zipper, maybe you have two zippers, it's a little bit trickier, and I'll show you in just a moment how to handle that. But on this side, we're just gonna go ahead and pin or clip all along. If this is like you coming along the seam allowance and that's open, you can kind of push that closed just a little bit together as you're sewing. But we're gonna go ahead and pin or clip that all along first. And you can flip it over and check from the back side that you got everything in place. Okay, on this side with the zipper, what's tricky about it is that if we try to close the zipper like that, it doesn't match up. And you're like, wow, it doesn't look right. But if we open the zipper, all of a sudden it's flat and it matches up. But that means that when we're sewing along, we can't sew through an entire zipper pull, right? So you can start at these boxed corner edges right here. Make sure they line up well on both of these sides, and again on the layers, make sure that they're all in there so that you catch them all when you sew this. Okay, right here where this zipper is, what we're going to do is we're going to backstitch and sew to here as close as we can to the zipper and backstitch, and then hop over to the other side, backstitch and sew to the end and backstitch. And we'll come in after we get this sewn and do a little bit more stitching there, so don't worry. if you can pull the zipper, pull up just a tiny bit to catch a little bit more, you can. But see how when I start pulling it, like the fabric starts to wrinkle? We don't want that to wrinkle too much. It needs to stay flat. So do your best in there and just get as close as you can to the zipper on both sides. And so we'll sew this side, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, once you have those sewn into place, you can flip it right side out and just make sure it looks good on the sides. You have a couple of basting threads that I needed to pull, and I need to get in there just a little bit better. But make sure there's no gaps or holes or anything like that. And then we are going to close the zipper. If you have one or two zippers, you might have to close both of them, but you want to close it a bit like this so that you have this kind of triangular part now. And what you're going to do is sew from this line here and go down at a diagonal, just like that, off the zipper tape. And then this one here, you can start in that stitch line and come down this way so that we're making like a cross, making sure we catch the end of that zipper tape. Okay, once you have that all sewn in, we are going to trim the seam allowance a tiny bit, not a lot, because if we trim it too much, it actually makes it harder. So I'm just going to grab my pinking shears. You can also use regular shears for this. And I'm just going to trim down the seam allowance. And this fabric, my exterior fabric, likes to fray a lot here. So make sure I grab all those. See how my zipper is kind of sticking out a bit there? I'm going to trim a bit more of that off so that it's pretty much even. And then the same on the other side. And from here you have two options. You can either use double fold bias tape, and you can make it yourself if you'd like, or you can buy it pre-made. Oh, yeah, I was going to three. There's four folds. Yeah, there's the fourth fold. Okay, so it looks like this, and then, it folds up. So there's this option, or you can use fold over elastic, and you want to make sure that this is 1 inch so that when it's folded, it's a 1/2 inch. So see how they're the same. If I can get this folded back right, they're the same size. So either one of these two options is great. If you want to use the double fold bias tape, what you're going to do is if you're using the type that you get pre-made, which is what this is, there's going to be a side that is a little bit more narrow at the crease than the other side. So you always do the more narrow side on the binding part first. So what you can do is you want to lay this on here, and right here at the end, we're going to fold the bias tape into the wrong side by about 1/2 inch. And then we will pin or clip that onto the edge. Make sure you're not like back here, because when we fold it over, that end will stick out. You want to be up in this area, and you're going to line that skinnier crease with the seam here. And that is where we're going to sew. And you can use like the raw edge there to align it. And we'll go all the way along. You can keep it pretty taut. You don't want to like pull too hard, but keep it taut as you go. And then at this end, you can choose to trim it now and fold it over and just have it all clipped into place. Or you can take it to the sewing machine and at the end, trim it to where you have, that 1/2 inch fold left, and then trim it then. That way it's the exact right length, but that's up to you. So on this side, we'll do this, and I think I'll just go ahead and trim it now, and then you can always trim more off, so we can make it just a tiny bit longer. and then fold that back. And so that way, so the reason that we fold it there is that when we flip it over, now there's no raw edge there. Okay, so that's the side we're going to do with the double fold bias. Now, I recommend if you're doing a bag to do the same on both sides, but I'm just showing you how to do both. So this side will do that. On the other side, we'll use the fold over elastic. Now there's a shiny side and there's a matte side, and it doesn't matter which way you put up, it's just whichever way you like it. So you can kind of compare it to your fabric and think, oh, what will look prettier? I think I like the matte side with this fabric. So you're kind of going to do the same thing. We're going to fold it under by about 1/2 inch there, and then line it up. On this one, what we can choose to do though is we can actually just fold it all the way around the seam and just sandwich it all at once, and then just stitch all along there. If you find this difficult to do a straight stitch and catch both sides of the fold over elastic, you can do a little zigzag stitch. The fold over elastic is stretchy, as you would think, and so you can stretch it just a little bit as you go, and then you'll have a nicer looking finish. And the hardest part might just be at that zipper, going over that area right there. And at the end, we'll do the same thing, just leave it a bit longer and then fold it under and sandwich it on. Just like that. So with the fold over elastic, you can just do it the one time. You can just sew all the way down this, and you want to sew, you know, about 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the elastic, and just make sure that you're catching both of the sides. And then on this side, you have to do it in 2 parts, right? So we're going to sew in this crease first, and then once we've got that sewn up, we will fold it over and then sew it again. So let's go over to the sewing machine and get these sewn up. At the end, make sure that your bias tape is again folded to that wrong side by about 1/2 inch, and that it comes all the way up to that raw edge that we want to cover. Okay, and you see mine is struggling right there to cover that, so I may go over that just one more time and try to get just a tiny bit closer. But this part is really tricky, and if it's not perfect, it's kind of tucked into the back, so it's going to be okay. But you can see it kind of went in a little bit because I was worried about that zipper pull. So maybe what I'll do is pull that just a bit that way so that we can try to get in there better. That's a little bit better, okay? And then we're going to flip it to the other side, and we're going to pin it in place again over here, and just try to cover up all your stitching lines. Okay, and then so what you can do is you can stitch again along here, just kind of like in that seam, because see how it's kind of pulled over more? If you've made this bias tape yourself and you don't have one that's folded more than the other, then you'll need to stitch a little bit further out, like here, to make sure that you catch everything on the opposite side. But we'll go ahead and top stitch along that. If you match your thread, like if I switch to off-white right now, or kind of like a taupe color, right, it would look better, but I'm gonna go ahead and stick with the pink. Okay, we're almost done. And so we're gonna flip this right side out, and we're gonna pull these side panels up, and then you have to make the decision now if you would like to just keep them like this and you're all finished, or if you wanna do one more step, and that last step is to put these side panels up and hand stitch them into place right here in these corners. So if you choose to do the hand stitching, what you're going to do is just kind of pop these up here into this corner and pin it into place on all four. Make sure it's nice and straight and it sits up in the bag right at that corner so that they're even. Okay, look and see how that all is sitting. If you need to like pull them down, push them up a little bit to make sure that it's not like coming up too high and that you have like each of these corners pushed down, you can make those adjustments. And then we're just going to grab some thread and double it over, and we can do a ladder stitch right here on each of these. So to do a ladder stitch, you're going to come, you can kind of like hide it behind this a little bit, and you can stitch back and forth and kind of have like that invisible stitch right there. And then when we're all finished, this will always kind of just pop up when we open it. So we have like this open spot, and then we can close it in and zip it. And our bag will be all finished. That is looking so cute. Okay, so I'm going to go grab my thread and hurry and do that ladder stitch, and then mine will be all done. Or if you decide not to do yours, then your bag is all finished and good job. Okay, so to do the ladder stitch, if you're doing that, I've got a piece of thread doubled over through this, and so that the ends of the thread kind of match up here. And what I'm going to do is make a big knot. So I like to just go around, and then I don't pull it closed yet. I keep going around, and depending on the thickness of your fabric and how big your needle is, you may need to do this more or less times. But I think I went around there about, I don't know, 5 times or so. And what you get then is a nice thick knot, and that way it won't pull through your fabric. And then we're going to pop that into one of these corners. And like I said, you can kind of hide, pull that one down just a tiny bit after looking at how that looks. I just want that to be a little bit better. Okay, so we're going to grab our thread, and we can stick it in, and you could just go through the one layer of the lining and not out to the exterior. Actually, I'm trying to decide where to start that would be best. Probably like right here, but I want to hide it. So I'm going to kind of go in like this and come up, and see my knot was thick enough to hold. And then we'll go on the side of the side panel and go through there. If you try to make your stitches even, this will look better, but this is a kind of a tricky stitch, I think, to make it look nice. It takes some practice, but just do your best. And pull that tight. And then on the other side right here, we're going to go into the bag exactly where we came out. So kind of like a ladder. So it came here. So don't go up here or down here. We want to go straight across. We go in and we make about the same size stitch as we did on the side panel. And see how it's kind of hiding it a bit. And then we'll go in again and again, like we're going to go straight across. So we'll come in right here. Okay, and then we'll just keep doing that. So we're going to go across to this side of the bag. Try to make your stitches even if you can. Okay, and then when you get to the end, you can just go ahead and tie that off. So I'm going to go through this side panel again, and then instead of coming just straight out, I'm going to go through the loop, and that will give me a nice tie, and you can do that twice. And then I like to cut it off close to the needle and then tie a square knot just to make sure that that doesn't come undone. So I'll put one side through and then do the other thread through the same hole. And then go ahead and trim that. And now you have one of the corners on. And then you'll just do the same for the last 3 corners and you'll be all finished. Okay, I'm all finished with mine. How did yours go? I decided to wait a day and get everything hand sewn up inside, and I'm really glad I did on this one. I love how it like stays open when you open it and you're not having to deal with the side panels like flopping in or anything. I haven't decided what I'm going to put in here yet, but I love the size of it. I think it's just like small enough and handy enough to put whatever you need and take it on the go. I think it's great for cosmetics and everything, but I think I could also use it here in my sewing room. So I'd love to know what you are going to use yours for, or what you would use it for if you haven't sewn it yet. Let me know in the comments. And if you have any questions, go ahead and ask those in the comments as well. And yeah, let me know how your bag went.